The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Welcome into Mission Minded. I'm Tony Kurre. He's Michael Coleman, the CEO of the Montgomery Area Food Bank, MAFB.org, down there in beautiful Montgomery, Alabama. They cover 35 counties in the great state of Alabama. They work with Feeding America to make sure that our bellies are full and doing a wonderful job. Michael, how you been, man? How's the week going so far? Everything good?
Well, it's always busy, but I love being busy. I love being challenged and feeding people across 35 counties and trying to close some of those gaps for families and for seniors and for kids. That's a challenge, but it's a challenge that I thrive on and blessed to be here. And I was just telling you before I jumped on, I love just coming in my office and just getting on the phone with you and talking through some of these issues, because it's a good break for me to really focus on other aspects of the world.
Well, lay on my couch. Let me throw some question at you, and we'll get you therapeutically through this 30 minutes here. You have a great Major League Baseball analogy we want to get to about how to speed up our meetings, since we're speeding up our favorite pastime. Well, you could say that meetings maybe is our favorite pastime in the industry of economics and business as we know it as well. So we'll get into that, and we have a couple emails: info@tonykurreradio.net, info@tonykurreradio.net. We'll get into that as well. And I do want to get into one right off the bat, because sometimes we run a little long here. Jim in Hoover had a question for you. Said, "I love the show. I listen every single week. Heard you talk about shows about bringing people in to change the culture of a particular business." He said, "What is the one attribute of people who come into businesses to turn a business around?"
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And I think that the attribute that I would be looking for is the ability to come in and to listen first and to assess, and then be able to think outside the box and really help give a process of what's necessary to begin to change the culture. In other words, identify what's wrong, not on a personal level. I mean, not in and that's the problem, is when we're inside of it, everybody's got their own opinions. You really need somebody objectively. So if you're thinking about bringing somebody into your business, man, I really applaud you to come in. And even if they come out and say, "Hey, your business doesn't need a major overhaul, maybe it just needs a little bit of tweaking," I think you've got to have somebody that comes in and can think outside the box, but can assess and really then walk with you in very practical terms. If somebody's bringing you an overly complicated process that's just going to require more and more of your time, I would discourage that. Most of the time, for me, when I've come in and I've changed cultures within organizations, and I've done this many, many times throughout my adult life, is it starts with your leader. And so the leader has to come in and be consistent and has to have a set of values, and decisions have to be consistent with those values. So just for me, and I know this is really going a little bit beyond your question, But for me as the leader, I want to have a core set of values. I want to be able to make decisions that are consistent with those values. I want to be able to explain my decisions and take the time to explain as to why they are connected to those values. And if I ever have to depart from those values, or even give the appearance of departing from those values, I want to make sure that I'm explaining in a way that shows how I got there, so as I don't appear to be coming across as inconsistent. So, but that doesn't mean that I'm just as vulnerable as anybody else coming in and missing the mark. Yeah. And so having that outside person, man or woman, come in, assess, but look, it's not rocket science. It's just doing the right thing and caring about putting others in front of yourself. And you communicate that and live that out in a real meaningful way, you'll see your culture get better.
You're listening to Mission Minded here. It airs at least 5 times a week on TKR, Tony Kurre Radio. Get the TKR app. Of course, it's available on Android and Apple at TKR, Tony Kurre Radio. And also listen to our Tony Kurre Radio podcast network. It's available on every major industry out there as well. I think I speak for most people. We've all been through changes where the new boss comes in, and obviously you have several people in the office place. You have ones that it really doesn't affect at all because they don't care. You got the guys who like to kiss ass, and then you got the ones who want to fight. And I've been through all those. And when you have a business owner come in and they realize he's being brought in to turn your business around, so you're in trouble. This needs to work. But they come in with some really profound and different ways that will affect not only the business you're working for, but maybe your job performance as well. And you see it. You'll have a big 2-hour meeting. The guy comes in. He says all the right things. My door is always open. We can talk, blah, 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 very transparent. And then he starts throwing these things out that are totally unlike anything you've seen in your industry. And I speak from experience from a radio standpoint. And then normally what happens is everyone kind of goes to their cubicle. At the end of the day, they all go out and drink beer together, and they talk about the lousy new guy they just hired. They argue about it like, this is never going to work. He doesn't understand the business. He's not even from here, that kind of thing. How would you say that employees that had that feeling need to deal with? I was always a leader, and so they would meet with me first. And they'd say, we're bringing in this guy. Here's what we're going to do, and we need you to get on board with this idea, because people are going to look at you, and if you believe in it, then the rest of the staff will believe in it. And sometimes it was stuff that I didn't believe in, and sometimes it didn't work. How would you tell employees to deal with a guy like that?
Yeah, so I do think employees bear some responsibility in that. It's already difficult for somebody to go through an interview process, be examined up and down, be questioned, but something they've said, something they've done, or either proven successes of the past have gotten them to the position they are to be able to come in. And I think it's really foolish if I'm an employee and somebody's coming in that says they're going to make our place different. It's going to make it better. It's going to make it more productive. It's going to be a win for everybody. Then I think I owe it to them to say, you know what, even if I can't see it, I'm gonna try to learn what they're saying, and I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. And only after I've done everything they've asked me to do, but it's not producing the results, and it's very clear that this paradigm shift is not going to be successful in this industry at this time, then I think it's up to all of us to, as employees, to keep an open mind and to try. And me, from a boss, when I've come into those situations, I had a guy said when I went to explain it to him what I wanted his role to be, he goes, well, I got to be honest with you, I don't see it, but hey, I'm willing to give it a try. And that was both honest. And and I appreciated that. He said, look, I don't see what you see right now, but I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't see it. There have been times here, so I've been in the Montgomery Food Bank almost a year, and there's still, on occasion, an employee that I will have to dismiss because they won't adapt or won't change. The vast majority of employees that were like that, we did have a huge turnover our first year, and it's because, there were lots of people here, been here 15, 16 years, and I desperately wanted them to be successful. But when I call an employee in and they're refusing to change, and so I just hold their feet to the fire and say, okay, explain to me. And bottom line is, when you peel it all back, they're just not going to do it any different. And you have to say goodbye. But I'm going to tell you something. If an employee tells me and lets me know up front that they're willing to, hey, try it. Hey, I don't get it, but I'm in there with you. Mm-hmm. Man, I got all the patience in the world for that person, and then I even try to make an extra effort to go back and say, okay, we did this. Here's why we did it this way, because it's consistent with these values that I have. And so let me give a good example. Maybe that'll help illuminate it. Mm-hmm. So when I went to Jimmy Hill Mission, and I'm not at Jimmy Hill anymore, so I think I can share this. Jimmy Hill, by the way, is a wonderful organization. I dearly love them. I have some dear friends that still work there. But everybody knows when I came there, I noticed that I didn't feel like that the clients, who were mostly homeless, but those struggling with addiction, they felt like that the staff, not all, but some, felt like, well, you got to control these people, because if you don't control them, so it was almost like a prison environment, like a county jail. You had to, it's not that they were mean to them, but they were not nurturing at all or whatever. And when I came in, I said, listen, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian. And so these are some of the most broken people you're ever going to encounter in your life. And what they need is they need to know, first of all, that we're for them, and we're here for them to help them be successful, and that we're going to wrap our arms around them and love them in ways that maybe they've never experienced in their life. And you don't have to throw accountability out the window to love somebody dynamically. And so about 10% of the staff was on board with me my first week. Now, to a lot of them's credit, they said, well, and I even had a guy who's now one of the biggest believers came up to me and said, Michael, I'm going to tell you, this ain't never going to work. Yeah. He said, and I said, okay, I understand, but will you at least go with me down this journey? And now he's the biggest advocate for what we were doing. It totally changed the culture. And so I had to stick to it. And I'm going to tell you something for our audience. There were lots of times I went home in tears out of frustration. There were lots of times I doubted myself. There were lots of times I said, this isn't worth it. Because when it's like turning an aircraft carrier around in a very small space. And it is so tedious and it is so emotionally draining. And it's so much on you as a leader, but you're pushing through, because once you get it turned around, and once you start going in a different direction, and you've won some hearts and you've won some minds, and they start seeing the results, man, you'll never experience anything as great as that.
It's a great way to explain it. And I'll take it one step further, then we'll get into our meeting space. What is it like when someone brings in somebody that has been hired by corporate? In other words, perhaps you're a franchise, there's a bigger business that's over top of yours. And I'll use this as an example. I went to a restaurant last night and I couldn't get any ketchup. And I asked the person, I said, can I please get some ketchup? And they're like, yeah, we cut back on our ketchup because we're trying to save money. And first of all, I couldn't believe she told me that. She said, but we're doing it corporate wide. She's like, it came from corporate. Like, she's pushing it off on someone else. It wasn't her fault. And I understood that. She was the manager there. She said, so we're only allowed to give you 3 packets of ketchup. With your meal, you have to pay for ketchup. And I was like, are you serious? And I couldn't believe it, because it was a pretty decent restaurant, and a restaurant we go to a lot. When you have a boss that comes in that is getting force-fed things they need to change from a corporate level, how does that usually play out? And let me ask you this. Is it okay for the boss to say, listen, I don't want to do this. I think this is a lousy idea too, but this is coming from corporate, so just do it. What does that make the boss look like?
Yeah, so it looks like the boss is looking for excuses. And look, sometimes you're just trying to be an honest communicator. You're not trying to throw anybody on the bus, but if you're having to enforce something that seems callous or seems dumb, and your employees are looking at you like you got a tree growing out of your forehead, then yeah, you're like, hey, look, this isn't my idea, just so you know. I'm not trying to save the company by saving ketchup. But there are, historically in business, you've got the number crunchers, the bean counters who come in that know nothing about the local people, the local mission. They're just coming in, and they don't have relationships with those that you're serving. They don't have any part of it. They're just coming in, and as a matter of fact, I had a guy, and that was his whole existence, is his company would, with businesses that were going completely out of business, he would go in and just get rid of everything, like the last 60 to 90 days of a business, and just clear all the inventory out, and so he had to make some very tough decisions. But he could do that. He didn't care about that company. He didn't have any emotional investment in that company. He wasn't there to make that kind of, he just there to, to clean it out and to save money. And that's the feeling that you get. And so that's why it's so difficult, is even if those policies that are bringing in may ultimately save dollars, you're alienating those that you serve. I think it's a huge mistake, but I think companies continue to do it because, especially if you're publicly traded, it's all about your bottom line. And are you making money? Or are you not? It's not about who's giving the best service, caring about the most people, and meeting your public obligations to just be a socially responsible company.
Michael Coleman is the CEO of the Montgomery Area Food Bank, mafb.org. You can check out their website. They do wonderful work here in the great state of Alabama. I'm Tony Kurre. This is Mission Minded. Keep your mind, your mission in your mind. We do it every single week, 5 times a week on the TKR app, and of course, wherever you get your favorite podcast. You wanted to talk about meetings. Oh man, just the word meetings make people cringe. We have to have a meetings. It is a necessary part of any business. I understand that. We used to have a staff meeting at our classic rock station every Monday at 1:00. And I will say as much that I thought it was a great thing. I thought it was wonderful that we got together at least once a week, because you got everybody in the office. You got people that perhaps maybe you wouldn't even talk to during the week, but you had them all in one room. Now, once a week may have been a little too much. And I know you have conscious groups with non-for-profits where you get together and you're beating around ideas. First question right out of the bat, and then we'll talk about how you're speeding up meetings. And I know you were talking about Major League Baseball. They obviously have a pitch clock now. No one thought it would work, and it's working fabulously. Now we have 4-hour games being done in 3, 3.5, or 2.5, depending on how you look at it. But when you have meetings, what is the most important part of actually getting people together? Is it just getting people together, or are things actually getting done? And should you have meetings just because you have meetings every week?
See, I think meetings for the sake of meetings are obviously a bad idea. As a matter of fact, I've had to chastise some workers here, or let me say, I hate to say chastise, I had to encourage workers, because we get to be a slave sometimes by email or Zoom. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're all 5 feet. Our offices are 5 feet from each other. Let's get up and go have a quick discussion. It's just easier we'll schedule a meeting and we could just meet ourselves to death. But when you're talking about a lot of things, so my particular thing is I have at least one meeting a week with all the director level. And what I've asked them to do is I'm gonna have an agenda for them, and I'm gonna talk about things that I think are relevant to the entire organization. And then I go around, and we do it through Zoom, but go around and let everybody. And I said, only speak to those issues that are relevant to the entire company. Don't speak about things that you're doing that nobody needs to know about, or there's no coordination involved with other departments. And if you need to coordinate with other departments, you handle all that offline. You only bring to the table things that are relevant for the entire group. And the reason I did that is because when I got here, there was a culture of everybody working in silos. And so the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. And so you would have a big event scheduled on a day, but there was no coordination. Nobody else was brought along. Nobody else was in the planning. Nobody else was aware. And so you see the pitfalls of not having a meeting. So I very much believe in the importance of it, but just like baseball is kind of going through, and I saw this analogy, it's really so fitting because baseball was 3 hours and 11, the average game last year was 3 hours and 11 minutes. Mm-hmm. And now so far, the average game is 2 hours and 39 minutes. So it's over 30 minutes difference. And about 32 minutes difference a game. And that's significant because I'm going to tell you, when I was a young kid and young adult, I watched the Braves, and it didn't matter if they were in last place. I could watch every pitch. But I've gotten to where I can't hardly sit through a baseball game. And so having it to speed it up, it really keeps you more focused. It really makes it more enjoyable. There's more stolen bases. Just a lot of positive things that are coming out of it. So you think, well, how does that affect meetings? Well, one of the things I've noticed is and that this particular article referenced was you got to figure out what to subtract. So you make something better. We oftentimes think we need to add something. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're going into a meeting, some of the best thing you can do is subtract. And sometimes you subtract time, or it could be how often you meet, or it could be who you have at the table. So I've encountered this many, many times where you want to open it up because I want to be transparent and I want people to get information. But if you have the wrong person in the room who ends up doesn't know how to manage a meeting or doesn't know how to participate in a meeting, and they can end up dominating a meeting, and then you can't get them to hush. And so sometimes you have to really think, who needs to know this information? And if they don't really need to know it, why am I wasting their time coming here? Or why am I endangering by inviting somebody that's inappropriate for this meeting, giving them the avenue to come in and talk about things of which just end up making the meet and drag unnecessarily. So I think you have to figure out how. The first thing is what can I subtract? Can I take away time? Can I take away people? Can I take away how often we meet? But I really think that the number one thing you could do to benefit your company and pick up morale is say, hey, we're going to do 30 minutes. This is normally an hour-long meeting. We're going 30 minutes, and it's a hard stop at 30 minutes. And let's go. And you push through. You don't interrupt everybody. You be respectful of everybody's time in the organization. I think that's a really key important point.
No, I think you're spot on, because I mean, when you go into a meeting at 1:00 and you don't know what's going to end, that's not a good thing. If you say it's from 1 to 1:30 or 1 to 1:45 or 2:00, you got to get it in. And rarely do you actually go till the time limit anyway, so you're usually done. Michael Coleman, Montgomery Food Bank, he's the CEO. We're talking about how to speed up meetings. Do we have too many meetings? I think a lot of people, and again, I think COVID really affected this in our pandemic when we were outside, because a lot of those meetings were on Zoom meetings. A lot of those meetings were being emailed. People were checking their emails, and we had different things to check and make sure people were working and this, that, and the other. But it does seem like people always say, I'm having a meeting about a meeting, or I'm having a meeting to make sure that I'm ready for the next meeting. And it's like, how many meetings do we possibly need to have? And I know people hate meetings, but you know what? If your business is running like a top, you don't need to have meetings. It seems like the more meetings you have, the less successful your business is.
Well, it definitely, I mean, some statistics have people who are working, who spend 18 hours a week. I mean, that's almost half of a 40-hour work week in meetings. Yeah. And so you're losing, if you have a company with thousands of people, I mean, you're losing millions of dollars a year. And I mean, but we don't see that. We don't see the lost productivity. We don't see that. And so sometimes, I mean, like I said, we very much overkill on meetings. I will tell you, one of the things that I've tried to focus on is lots of times, because I'm a relational person, and so I like somebody to come in here and talk 15 minutes about business, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, tell me what's going on in your life, and I like to save a little bit of time for that. But of course, if that person's not the same way, then I'm really just causing them stress by making an introverted person sit here and converse with me. But one of the things I've noticed from other people is lots of times is they will put a minute, I mean, where I would schedule a Zoom for an hour just in case it runs long from 30 minutes. I mean, they're like 20 minutes, they're like 30 minutes, and they're like, hey, this is my hard stop, and I'm moving on. And it does. From my perspective, as coming on and joining them in a meeting, I'm like, wait a minute, they've given me 20 minutes of their time. I got to cut to the chase. And so sometimes if you schedule 45 minutes on a meeting, you're going to take 45 minutes. If you schedule an hour, you could take an hour. And so part of, if you're the person scheduling the meeting or calling the meeting, you're the one that obviously has enough power to do that. And if you do that, I think you start it on time. You start it, you make it as slim in terms of time and width as you can, and you make it productive. And then people like, hey, I was there 30 minutes, but that was a good 30 minutes. And I think most people don't mind that. I think what people hate is getting meetings dragging out, being told stuff that doesn't matter, stuff that could be handled in an email. And I think that's where the frustration gets in. So every time you call a meeting, there's the eye roll. People just come into these meetings with terrible attitudes, not because they have a bad attitude, but because they know they're not productive. Yeah.
And depending on what your workforce is and what kind of business you're running, have meetings during daylight hours. We used to have, I know our sales staff had a meeting every Friday at 5 in the conference room. And man, I used to hear about it all the time. And they'd come walking out because I was still in there until 7 o'clock. I was like, hey, what are y'all still doing here? Because I knew they were in a meeting, or they'd have a meeting on Monday morning at 7 because they were going to make sure they had their ass at work every single week. He's Michael Coleman. Coleman, 35 counties. The Montgomery Area Food Bank does a fantastic job. Do want to get into one more email here, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Sylvia in Barfield wants to know, how has AI influenced the hiring practice and process in this country right now? And I pulled up an article on Business Insider, and they basically said thousands of users have shared comments commiserating with how surprisingly demoralizing they've found their own job searches. Their anecdotes and those of people who have spoken would suggest the world of hiring is strange right now. Economic instability, opaque hiring processes, and the destabilizing rise of technologies like generative AI have converged into an environment where it's hard for job seekers to feel like they have even a basic sense of what is going on. What does that paragraph mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you how I reflected on that is, boy, when I just looking at my own experience, when I was applying around, and I was applying to a lot of jobs, mostly CEO positions or C-level type positions. And, just like you hear all the time, is I was getting screened out of jobs that I was perfectly qualified for, but AI was looking for certain words. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the person who could be able to look at that and go, oh, you know what? It's not worded exactly like we're looking for. But so I was getting, or I'm firmly believe I was getting screened out of jobs. And then once you're doing that, sometimes you wait a month or two, you don't hear anything back. You're like, I'm perfect for this job, but you couldn't. There's no way past it. And it's so frustrating. It's so demoralizing because you can't talk to a human. And so you feel like this, what is this all about? I mean, it's just, you feel detached from reality. It's, it was just a miserable process. And because you don't know, hey, is somebody looking at this and making a decision, or is this just going into the trash heap?
Yep.
Because a computer says I'm not saying the right word that this company had programmed in there. And so we know for a fact that that's happening all over, and especially when you look just online with Indeed. And you have so many AI tools. Now we hire sometimes off Indeed, but we look at everybody who submits an application. We personally screen them, but you could set up tools in there that can automatically reject people. And but I just don't like that approach. But man, I tell you, it's and here's the problem with AI is it's almost no job that it's not going to affect, or no career industry that it's not going to affect. It's only going to get worse from here. The only things AI can't do is stuff like some of the traditional things, like you can't repair HVACs. Yeah. You can't you can't be AI can't be a plumber. Yep. All those kind of things. But some of these software, all the software development, everything that's got to do with computer interface, all that kind of stuff. With robotics and everything else, I'm telling you, it's going to affect every industry to some level.
Well, I like everything we got too, Michael. We come up with this great idea, but we do it as a supplementary situation, right? It's if we could use AI to correct some verbiage or whatever, we have word correct on our computers. We all use it, but when you're exclusively using it to get your point across, then that's where it blows up in your face. And that's why a lot of people out in Hollywood right now are striking, because they're actually writing scripts with just AI. They don't even have writers anymore. Now, if you got a writer and you want to run it through an AI computer to kind of correct some things, or maybe make things a little bit better, maybe embellish, or maybe supplement a little bit, it's another reason. But when you take the human factor out of it completely, sometimes you get some really bad scripts for sure. Yeah. Hey, great stuff, my friend. Tell everyone where they can find you and how they can help out the Montgomery Food Bank and Feeding America.
Yeah, go to mafb.org or go to your local food bank, whatever that is. If you'll just type in food bank near me on Google and support your local food bank. Or if you ever want to reach out to me directly, find me very easily on LinkedIn, and I'll be glad to connect with anybody who has a question or just wants to have a chat.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.